for joining us on The Skeptic Psychic, where we delve into ancient societies, the ghosts, the paranormal, UFOs, all looking at it from the perspective of the true believer and from the skeptic perspective. Joining me, my partner, my co-host, my sibling, Kimber Rodriguez. Myself, I am Richard Gregg. And again, let's look into being the skeptic psychic.
Hi, I'm a bad person. I completely forgot what was going to be happening today. Although yesterday was not my fault due to the fact of some technical difficulties beyond my control, but today was my fault. I ask everybody to please forgive me. And welcome to another edition of the Skeptic Cycle, where we delve into the wonderful world of interesting topics. With me, as always, the wonderful, smart, and talented sister of mine, Kimber Rodriguez.
Hello. Yes, I apologize for yesterday. We had a act of God come through. Friday night, we had a horrible thunderstorm with 80-mile winds, and it knocked out my internet. So they barely got it fixed today at one of the, I think it was around noon that they finally fixed our internet. We had 128,000 people in the area lose light. So thankfully I did keep that. But yeah, we did lose the internet for quite a few days. So today I've been playing catch up. What's up with you?
I've been playing with mayonnaise and mustard.
Yum, my favorite.
Oh yeah, a little barbecue sauce too.
See, that's what Mercy likes is barbecue sauce.
Yeah,
he likes it on just about everything.
Mm-hmm.
So, what else is new this week?
Well, let's see. I'm going to possibly DMing my first ever nephew in D&D game.
Interesting.
Yes.
That sounds like fun. Yeah, I had a weird dream the other night.
Okay.
I dreamt that, well, first of all, mom and dad were still together. Dad, of course, was still alive.
Mm-hmm.
And we were all living in a house. It was mom and dad and you and me and Scott. And mom and dad went to the store, and I'm not sure where Scott went, but you and I were the only ones at the house, and you're in your room doing something. And I see a vehicle pull up, so I'm thinking it's our parents. My husband's laughing in the background if you hear him.
Yes.
Sorry about that. But so I go and I open the door, and there's a guy bent over putting down a case of beer, which I'm assuming it must be dad because, well, beer and dad. But they stand up, and it's Harrison Ford.
Okay.
So I'm like freaking out because Harrison Ford is at our door. And it turns out that mom and dad are having this huge party and all these celebrities are coming by. And yeah, it was very weird.
Uh-huh.
Oh.
So we were having a celebrity party.
Yes. Mom and dad were having a celebrity party.
Okay.
Yes. And that's pretty much how you reacted to it in the dream, too. You were just like, okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, what are we talking about tonight?
Well, strange. It's almost a strange coincidence. Which is our topic today?
Yes, we've all heard the expression "speak of the devil" and "it's a small world," and it seems coincidences happen every day, and we think nothing of them. However,
ever,
some coincidences are so strange, one might think they are downright creepy and paranormal. Tonight we discuss stories of odd happenings that are so eerily similar they make you think they are out of this world. Why don't you go ahead and start out with one of the most famous coincidences in history?
Well, we can also look at the Lincoln Kennedy coincidences of pretty much urban legends on that. Kennedy and Lincoln are a piece of American folklore of unknown origin. Both of them brought in a sense of peace as well as in a war. I mean, they appeared in the mainstream America press in 1964, a year after the assassination of John F. Kennedy, having both appeared prior to that in the GOP Congressional Committee hearing newsletter. In 1970, Mark Gardner examined the list and articles in Scientific America that later reprinted in his 80 book, The Magic Numbers of Dr. Matrix, pointing out that several coincidences were based on misinformation. A 1999 examination by Snopes found listing coincidences easily explored as chance. 92, the skeptical ran a spooky presidential coincidental contest. One person found 16 similar coincidences between Mr. Kennedy and former President Alvaro Obregón. Another came up with a list with 21 pairs of U.S. presidents.
Yes, that is Obregón, and he was the president of Mexico.
Mexico.
Mexico. Now, for a list of the coincidences that are commonly associated with the conspiracy, some of these statements are not true. Lincoln and Kennedy each have 7 letters. Both presidents were elected to Congress in 46 and later to the presidency in 60. Both were assassinated by John Wilkes Booth and Harvey Lee Oswald, who were both born in 39 and were known by their 3 names, which each composed of 15 letters. Booth ran from a theater and was caught in a warehouse, while Oswald ran from a warehouse and was caught in a theater. Both assassins were Southerners. Both of the president's successors were named Johnson and were born in 08. Both Lincoln and Kennedy were particularly concerned with civil rights and made their views strongly known. Also, both presidents were shot in the head on a Friday. One sec. Sorry, husband's laughing at the TV. Lincoln had a secretary named Kennedy who told him not to go to Ford's Theater. And Kennedy had a secretary named Evelyn Lincoln, and she warned him not to go to Dallas. Both Oswald and Booth were assassinated before they could be put on trial. Now, from those statements that I listed above, why don't you tell us which ones were actually true, or some of them that were true?
Let's see. In my deep, dark, physical mind of mine, I would say that Kennedy did have a secretary named Lincoln, but Lincoln did not have a secretary named Kennedy. His secretary was named John G. Nicolay and John M. Hay. Booth ran from the theater and was caught in a warehouse. Oswald ran from a warehouse and was caught in the theater. This is also true. Booth did run from Ford's Theater, but was caught in a barn in Virginia, not a warehouse. Oswald fled from the Texas School Book Depository, which was a warehouse, and he was arrested in a movie theater. Booth, 1839. Oswald, 1939.
Okay.
Oswald actually was born in 1939, while John Wilkes was 1838. Both presidents were assassinated by Southerners. Oswald, New Orleans, and Booth was born in Maryland, which was a Union state.
Yes, those are the false ones. However, the true ones were that both were actually elected to Congress in 46. Lincoln was in 1846, and he was from Illinois, while Kennedy from Massachusetts was elected in 1946. Both were elected to presidency in 60, as Lincoln was elected in 1860, Kennedy in 1960. Both have 7 letters in their last name. They both were concerned with civil rights, as Lincoln felt strongly that slaves should be freed, and he issued the Emancipation of Proclamation, while Kennedy was concerned with racial equality, was the first to propose the Civil Rights Act of 1964. They did both marry in their 30s to women who were in their 20s, and both were shot on a Friday. Lincoln was shot on Good Friday, which was April 14th, 1865, and Kennedy was shot Friday, November 22nd, 1963. And, of course, both were shot in the head. They both had successors named Johnson, Andrew Johnson, and Lyndon B. Johnson. And both succeeders were Southerners. Andrew Johnson was from Tennessee, and Lyndon B. from the great state of Texas.
Our Texas, oh hell, almighty state.
So wonderful, so great.
God bless you, Texas, and keep you brave and strong.
Also, both successors were born in 08, being 1808 and 1908. Both assassins, John Wilkes Booth and Lee Harvey Oswald, were known by 3 names. However,
Ever.
this is common for many notorious assassins covered by the press. Another example would be Mark David Chapman, because this is routinely done to help avoid tarnishing reputation of people with similar names. And each assassin's full name does have 15 letters. Now, the analysis of all this is that some urban folklorists believe the list is provided a way for people to make sense of 2 tragic events that happened in our history here in America. This is by seeking out patterns. Gardner and others said it is easy to find patterns relating to people and events. And this phenomenon is called apophenia. I guess maybe, yeah, I wonder if that's where pop culture came from.
Apophenia mean?
It is the tendency to perceive order in random configurations. I wonder if that's where the word pop culture comes from. What do you think?
It may be.
Also, as you mentioned, it wasn't Lincoln's secretary who told him not to go to the theater, but his footman by the name of William H. Crook, which is interesting because I always thought it was Mary Todd who told him not to go.
There's always some people say it was Todd. But
So
then,
what are
of course,
some... Yes, go ahead.
But then, of course, there's also a few people that say that a psychic predicted Lincoln's assassination a week before it happened.
So what other strange coincidences have occurred with our presidents?
Well, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams have died hours apart from one another. And which is funny about that is when John Adams heard that Thomas Jefferson died, his last words were, "Well, seems like he went for he's always wanting to be going first." July 4th, 1826, the 50th anniversary of the independence is when they both died. Coincidence? Maybe. Now, the Continental Conference was convened in 1775. Jefferson and Adams became friends. They worked together to draft the Declaration of Independence, spent time together as diplomats for the United States in Europe. Their relationship frayed when Jefferson succeeded Adams in the president of 1801. On the opposite side of the Republic and the Federalist divide, the two men remained estranged until 1812. Adams sent Jefferson a New Year's greeting. Reconciliation spawned correspondence that had lasted nearly 15 years. On July 4th of 1826, the country celebrated 50 years of independence from Great Britain. 83-year-old Jefferson passed away at a Virginia estate in Monticello. 90-year-old Adams, who on his own deathbed in Quincy, Massachusetts, unaware of his friend's death, he whispered the last few sadly mistaken words. Thomas Jefferson survives.
Now, in another strange coincidence,
Thank you. No autographs, please. I don't need none.
sorry about that. In another strange coincidence, James Renault became the third of 5 presidents to die on the same day of Independence Day. Madison, who was Jefferson's close friend and succeeded him in the White House, died on June 28th of 1836. Now, interesting enough, if he would have taken the stimulants offered by the doctor, he would have prolonged his life until July 4th. So that's pretty interesting that, if he would have just taken his doctor's orders, he could have been another to die on that same day.
Mm-hmm.
But he sadly, decided to go against the doctor's orders, and he passed away on June 28th, just a mere few days shy of it. A year before that, Wilkes Booth killed Lincoln, and his brother Edwin saved the life of Lincoln's eldest son, Robert. Now, this is pretty interesting. Unlike his notorious brother, Edwin was a supporter of the Union during the War of the Civil.
Mm-hmm.
In late 1864, Lincoln's son, Robert Todd, was traveling from New York to Washington, D.C. Now, during a stop in Jersey City, New Jersey, he stepped back from the crowded platform to let others pass by and pressed his back against a train that was stopped. As the train began to move, Lincoln fell onto the tracks and would have been injured, or worse, if a stranger hadn't caught him by the collar and hauled him back into the platform. He later wrote, Lincoln immediately recognized his savior as the famous stage actor Edwin Booth and thanked him. He later learned of the identity of the man he had rescued. Booth later learned the identity of the man he rescued. And his friend Adam Badeau, a colonel of the Union Army, wrote to congratulate him. At the time, Todd Lincoln was then serving under Badeau's fellow officer, the General Ulysses S. Grant staff. So that's pretty interesting that John Wilkes Booth killed Lincoln, but Lincoln's son was saved by Edwin, who was John's brother. And his friend from the Union Army wrote to congratulate him as Todd was then serving under Grant. That's just really a whole shmoo of coincidences there, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I'd say also, but let's talk about Robert Lincoln. He was on the scene for not one, but 2 of the 3 presidents that were assassinated. Less than a month after sitting with his father's deathbed, Robert Todd resigned his Army commission, moved to Chicago with his distraught mother, later married and had 2 children, and established a successful law practice. He remained active in the politics. Accepting to the post Secretary of War in the administration of President James A. Garfield, not to be confused with Garfield from the comics.
I wonder if they both liked lasagna, though.
I am not sure about James A. Garfield.
Ah.
In July, Lincoln was at the railroad station in Washington, ready to travel to New Jersey with Garfield. Had been in office less than 2 months at the time. Before their train left the station, a deranged, disgruntled, office-seeking Charles Guillaume shot Garfield in the back. The president died of complications from a wound 2 months later. In 1901, President William McKinley invited Lincoln to Buffalo, New York to attend the Pan American Exposition. Lincoln arrived late. He was heading to meet the president when an anarchist named Leon Kontrolchik fatally shot McKinley in the chest and the abdomen in front of a crowd of well-wishers. Lincoln, in the later part of his career, served as president of the Pullman Company, was said to have rightly remarked a certain fatally shot about the presidential function when I am president.
Yes, there is an interesting theory behind behind so many presidents dying, which we will be discussing next month about the Indian curse of the presidents.
Yeah.
So if you haven't heard that one, that's going to be interesting to listen to next month. We have somebody on Twitch who is asking who we are. Skeptic Psychic is a podcast where I, Kim Rodriguez, and my brother, Richard Gregg, talk about the paranormal and whether we believe everything that we see out there. And tonight we're discussing strange coincidences. And are they just coincidences, or is there something else behind them? But now we move on to other coincidences from presidents. The first I want to talk about is
wait. I do also say that I'm not a bad person, and somebody's having barbecue.
No. Tashelle says that you were not a bad person, and when you mentioned about barbecue sauce, she was like, barbecue.
Okay. And there's also a Dana.
Yes, Dana's here, and she says hi to Mercy. And Phoebe has joined us as well.
All right. So I just want to make sure, again, bad person, so sorry.
Yes. So now we want to talk about the wrestler Chris Benoit. And, first I want to say that what happened with his family is short of nothing but heartbreak. But there is an odd coincidence that goes along with his death as well. In June of 2007, news outlets reported a bizarre scene that played out at the wrestler's home, ending in his suicide. Both his wife and his son were also found in the home, and they had passed. 14 hours before the bodies were even discovered, Benoit's Wikipedia page was updated. Now, this is where it gets eerie. It was updated to say that he had been having difficulties because of personal issues stemming from the death of his wife, Nancy. Mind you, at this time, Nancy was supposed to still be alive.
Mm-hmm.
Within the hour, the edit was reversed. There was no sourcing information, so it was taken down. However, the trolls were determined to continue with their joke. And they reposted the claim with sourcing the attribute to several pro wrestling websites. The first IP address came from Stamford, Connecticut. The WWE headquarters is in Stamford. Also, the second supposedly came from Sydney, Australia. The police in Atlanta were informed about the edits and investigated Benoit's home after the WWE received some unsettling text messages. Now, you could say that this was done by Benoit himself because of what was about to take place. However, the actual wiki user who was trolling was discovered and he declined all interviews. He did post an apology saying that the entire thing was just a major coincidence and he had made the random assertion on his own. So that's pretty, freaky. The fact that he just comes up on this with this idea on his own to say all this, and then it actually turned out to be true.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a little eerie, in my opinion.
Yes. Well, let's talk about Leonard Dell. He's an ordinary guy with an ordinary job and an ordinary headmaster at an ordinary strat school in Surrey, England. He had one of the most seemingly harmless hobbies ever: crossword puzzles. So much for writing them that the Telegraph, the newspaper, had begun running them in 1925. In June of 44, while he was at work as an official looking car pulled up, he was escorted out of the building by agents from MI5. Ooh. He returned a few days later, refusing to say a word about what happened. In 1958, which was about over 10 years later, he was allowed to tell his side of the story. MI5 came knocking at his door just before D-Day. Everyone was on edge. Our MI5 officer was trying to take his mind off problems of the world, doing a little crossword puzzle solving. He was concerned that when he started finding words as Utah, Overlord, Juno, Omaha, Neptune, and Mulberry in the puzzle. These are all code words for parts of the D-Day plan. Turned out that Dawes had written his crossword by giving his students blank layouts, asking them to fill in the words, then writing the clues last of all. The boys had been hanging out with some soldiers stationed nearby. They all had written some of the cool words that they had overheard. One of the major events that kicked off the start of World War I was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. His car was a Graf and stiff double phantom. It wasn't the curse of the car of death to be rumored to be. It did not bear not message. The car ended up in the impossible to pronounce Hero Gishman Museum of Vienna. It's
Here,
that
Glitchens. However you say it.
yes, Erman Gishman Museum in Vienna. It sat for almost 2 decades. British tourists pointed out the odd significance of the license plate. The plate that hadn't been replaced can be seen in photographs of the assassination that read A111118 as an armistice, November 11th, 1918. Now, there is that is actually supposed to be the, the date in which it ended World War One, November 11th, 1918.
Now, I'm not much into numerology, but is it just me or does it seem like that's grasping there? What do you think?
What, that it's A111118?
No, I'm not doubting that that's what it reads. I'm sure that that is actually the license plate. What I'm doubting is that what it's in reference to? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, like I said, it's the same date as the day Armistice Day, which is the end of World War One.
Right. Continue.
Yes, not numerology. It's just the date. That's the coincidence.
Right. Continue.
Yes. So we also have to look at in 1861, Valery Moline turned the use of his Virginia home, or is that McLean?
McLean.
All right. Well, I have to adjust this a bit here.
Yes, like the McLean, the sandwich from McDonald's that doesn't
Yes.
have any.
Was gearing up for the first battle of the Bull Run when a cannon crashed through his kitchen. In his diary, General McLean, that's more understandable, a comical effect of the artillery fight was the destruction of the dinner of myself and staff by a Federal shot that fell into the fireplace of my headquarters at his home. We are tempted to suggest that McLean was less inclined to see the humor. Fast forward. McLean moved his family farther from the front lines to a cottage in Appomattox County. He was certain he was well away from fighting. He was a right member of the final skirmishes of a dying war. When it came time for officials to choose a place for the end of the Civil War, it was made official. They chose his parlor. Okay, yeah, you just got a cannon shot into your house, and now they want to have the end of the final agreement signed in your parlor.
It gets worse.
Yeah, they just didn't sign the document. The men located the house with souvenirs afterwards. Talk about just adding insult to injuries. Come on.
So they choose this guy's home to sign the treaty, and then they loot the house for souvenirs afterwards. So they're
Yeah.
basically, the military is stealing your property because it's like, oh well, I need a remembrance of this day, so I'm going to take this vase, this urn over here with Grandpa's ashes in it, just as a memory of today. But wait a minute, that's
Nice little
mine.
bouquet. I think I'll take it home. That's always going to tell the wife. See that bouquet over there? Even though it's all dead and died? That's where I got it from.
Yes, I
Hmm.
mean, and it's like, excuse me, that's mine.
Oh,
Oh,
no,
did
no,
you
no,
hear a
no. It's
voice?
for prosperity. Prosperity.
Damn.
I agree with what Mercy said right there.
Yeah.
Language, please. This is a family-friendly show.
Yes.
Now, the attack on Pearl Harbor, which happened December 7th, 1941, changed the course of World War II. And it definitely changed our role in the U.S. Global tensions were high, and it is terrifying to think that someone inside the country not only knew what was going to happen, but was passing was passing information out in the weirdest way possible.
He was cashing his information out.
He was passing his information out
That's
because
right. $1.25.
yes. You see, in November 22nd of 1941, just a few days before, the New Yorker ran a few ads for a dice game they called the Deadly Double. You see, advertising a product is of the times.
Oh,
And
yeah.
these times dictated marketing the game with a major ad showing the game played by people hiding in an air raid shelter. It wasn't until after the attack on Pearl Harbor that people started noticing the numbers were showing on the ad's dice. One ad with a dice showed a 12 and a 7. Other ads supposedly bore numbers that referred to things like time and latitude of the attack. If you're thinking military intelligence would be interested in something like this, they absolutely were. It, however, was just another unfortunate coincidence. This theory was widespread, and the New Yorker Times ran a piece on the game's creator to debunk it. They explained that there was no actual link between the game and the war. And the creator's wife got in touch with the paper to say as much. The whole thing was eventually chalked up to a bit of coincidence and a lot of people's imaginations getting the better of them. But again, that's really interesting how on November 22nd they run this ad, and it's showing the dice as being 12 and 7, and then other dice showing the longitude and latitude of the attack on Pearl Harbor. I mean, if that wasn't planned, that's an eerie coincidence. What do you think?
Pretty eerie. But let's go ahead and talk about something that's closer to our generation. Let's talk about 9/11. Now, Jason and Jenny Karen Lawrence were vacationing in New York City on September 1st, 2001, the
11.
day of the worst terror attack in U.S. history, namely the destruction of the World Trade Center. They weren't among the thousands of casualties, but when it came to pick their next vacation, they decided to stay a little closer to their Birmingham, England home. They chose London. On July 7th, 2005, they were in England's capital. Four suicide bombers killed dozens and injured hundreds of people on the London Underground. In 2006, they headed to Mumbai. They were staying in the Kollam area. Terrorists attacked that city on November 25th, 6th, killing almost 180 people. In a horrible sense of coincidence, Mr. and Mrs. Carnes Lawrence might have had their front row seats in three of the worst terrorist attacks in recent history. They gave firsthand reports of the fear and resilience of what they saw on each of the scenes. It is a terrifying, truly terrifying 21st century reality that no one wanted to face. They did. Not once, not twice, but three times.
Yes. Can you imagine that? I mean, I would stop going on vacation at that point. What do you think?
Yeah. No holiday for me.
Nope, I'm just going to stay in my nice little home where it's quiet. Now, this is also an interesting thing. The very first issue of Life magazine hit the stands on November 23rd, 1936. In it was a photo of Montana Forks Peck Dam on the front. I'm sorry, that was on the front was a photo of Montana's Fort Peck Dam. Inside was the very first photo of a baby being cradled in a doctor's hands. This baby was George Story, and the caption read, "Life Begins." And a side note, Story went on to become a journalist, but that's not the big coincidence here. The coincidence lies in April 4th, 2000, as Life magazine announced it was ceasing publication. With the announcement of the end of Life magazine also came the end of Story's life, as he died only a few days later at the age of 63. Now,
Life ended.
yes,
Life began and life ended.
yes. Now, I don't know about you, but I am a huge history buff,
Mm-hmm. Sure you are.
and I am.
I know you
I'm
are, but what am I?
a huge history buff.
Maybe.
And in school, I remember learning about the American Revolution, but they did seem to kind of gloss over the 1812 war en route to the Civil War. I mean, we don't hear a whole lot about the War of 1812.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a shame because something strange happened as the British marched onto Washington, D.C. I mean, some serious hand of God stuff. Kind of similar to what happened to us this past weekend.
Yes.
You see, on August 25th, 1814, as the British were marching on Washington, President James Madison and his wife Dolly were getting ready to leave town. The fast approaching soldiers were getting their torches ready. And according to the Smithsonian, the day was insanely hot. We're talking temperatures over 100 degrees. By the time the British started setting fires, it was even hotter. And that's when, out of nowhere, a tornado hit. It formed right in the middle of the city. And as it was traveling along, it hit the British troops on their way to Capitol Hill. and it was, killing countless men, tossing cannons aside like they were toys. And it brought a thunderstorm that lasted for a few hours. Luckily, this storm put out all of the fires the British had started. Not only did the storm halt a lot of the damage that could have been done, the British forces abandoned the city after only 26 hours. Now, is this a coincidence that happened? Or was it a divine hand?
I'd say, also if you ever listen to Johnny Horton's The Battle of 1814, a lot of interesting things that in that song really did happen. They actually did find that the alligators down in Louisiana had actually eaten a lot of their or broken into a lot of the black powder. Now they didn't suggest to powder their behinds and light them up, but it is an interesting coincidence. Now, 150 years apart, both set in Hyde Park, Birmingham, England. May 27th, 1817, a 20-year-old Mary Ashford left a local dance, headed home around midnight. A few hours later, a man on his way home cut through the park and found her body. Officials arrested the 25-year-old and Abraham Thornton. Not long after the body was found, he had been seen with not before the murder, pleaded not guilty, and was acquitted. Fled the area to start a new life away from the scene of the murder trial. 1974, 20-year-old Barbara Forrest returning home from celebrating the May Bank holiday with her boyfriend. Her body was found June 4th, also in Pipe Hines Park, only 500, that's 500, away from her home. Little freaky there, but the similarities continue. She too was last seen alive on May 27th. The two women had been celebrating the same holiday, which was called Whit Monday. While Abraham Thompson was put on trial for the first murder, Michael Thomas, who was the leading suspect in the second one. Like Abraham's, Michael was acquitted of the murder trial. Neither case has been solved.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do you think it was a copycat murder, or do you think it's just a coincidence?
Well, if it's a copycat, why would do it 150 years after?
Maybe somebody was reading up on it and thought it was cool and wanted to recreate it.
Sure. Likely story.
Now we come on to Emily Sagi, who was rather a well-liked teacher and lived and worked in the French language school of Latvia in 1845. She was well-liked, for sure, but her doppelganger, not so much. She would occasionally find herself visited by her own doppelganger. And this happened while she was doing pretty everyday stuff, like eating dinner, writing her lessons. Sometimes the double would be seen in a completely different part of the school from where the real Sagi was. In one incident, 42 students sat in the school hall and worked on embroidery. The real Sagi picked flowers outside their window. They could see the real Sagi as well as the doppelganger who sat in the chair alongside her students. And this happened a lot to Sagi. She was fired from at least 20 different schools because of the phenomenon. Phenomenon. Even though there's a huge number of witnesses that saw her doppelganger, at times even standing or sitting right next to her, She herself never saw it. Those who witnessed the incident said she seemed to feel fatigued whenever the doppelganger appeared, but regained her strength when the double vanished. Now, that's something I want to talk about on a future episode as well. Is
Doppelgangers?
doppelgangers? Yes, that's an interesting phenomenon that I would love to discuss sometime.
Yes. Doppelgangers are an interesting phenomenon. Do, 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 do.
Do-do-do-do. Have you ever seen one?
A doppelganger?
Yes.
Yep.
Actually, yes, I have.
Interesting. I'd love to hear that story sometime when we do the episode.
Yes, I'll even tell you the whole story.
Sounds great. I
And
can't
the
wait for
weirdness.
that one. Yes.
Yes. Now, going back in time, back to World War One, the 50th Battalion of the Northern Regiment Cross was formed at the King of England's Southern Estate. I have got to do something about the highlighting of this because it's
Yes. The 5th Battalion at England's Sandringham Estate,
yes,
recruiting men from the King's staff.
yeah. Okay, there we go. After training, the Norfolks joined the fighting in the Gallipoli campaign. They were intended to push the Turkey out of war.
They were pushing the turkey out?
Yeah,
Gobble, gobble.
not those type of turkeys.
Okay.
It was Constantinople. Now it's Istanbul.
Ah.
Yes. The Norfolks arrived in the theater on August 10th, 1915. 2 days later, still suffering from the long sea journey before they could be acclimatized to the conditions, they were sent to their battle, their first and their last. The attack was a mess with inaccurate maps, poor information, a seasoned and well-prepared enemy. There was only one likely outcome. And the Norfolks marched stoically into it. During the assault, the soldiers were separated from the main force. After pressing home their attack in the wrong place, pursued their enemies into a burning forest and were never, ever seen again. Not a single soldier from the 5th returned from battle. It is assumed that the whole unit had been captured. The Turkish government had no record of the soldiers ever being held. After the war, bodies were found that are identified as their belongings to the missing unit. Later, eyewitnesses came forward with a bizarre report of a cloud enveloping the soldiers, flew away, and left no trace they had ever existed. You might think that these stories were quickly dismissal. Instead, they just inspired a host of conspiracy theories and speculation, only to serve to confuse and undermine official efforts to discover the truth. Boy, we should get Josh on that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Josh Gates, everybody. Love to see you on the show with us. Just sitting there shooting the bull. The true fate of the 5th Norfolks remains unresolved to the day.
I wonder if he did talk about that on his Expedition Unknown or one of those. It sounds like something he would have covered.
He would have covered this beautifully.
Yes. Now, on the morning of October 12th, 2000, 48-year-old Mary Henderson Morris left her Houston home. Later that day, her car was burned and found in a remote area. Her body had been torched inside. Her wedding ring was missing. By all accounts, Mary was a loving wife and mother and had no enemies. No one could figure out why she was why she was murdered in such a horrific fashion. The case took a surprising turn 3 days later, when a 39-year-old woman was found in her car, deceased in the same vicinity. She had been beaten, shot with her own gun, and in a failed attempt to make her death look like a suicide. Her name, Mary McGinnis Morris. Shortly before her death, McGinnis Morris had made a frantic phone call to 911 while she was being attacked. Attention soon turned to her husband, Mike, who stood to collect a substantial life insurance policy from her death. Mike had an alibi during the time of the murder, as phone records showed that he made a 4-minute call to Mary's cell phone 2 hours after her frantic call to 911. Mike claimed that no one answered the call, and he let Mary's phone ring for 4 minutes straight. Why didn't he go to voicemail?
Yeah.
That's odd.
Hmm.
This led to a theory that Mike hired someone to murder his wife, and the assassin killed the other woman named Mary Morris in mistake. They may have taken Mary Henderson Morris' missing wedding ring as proof that they completed the job, only to find out it was the wrong person. Police have since leaned towards the position that the two Mary Morris murders are nothing more than a bizarre coincidence and have no connection to each other, and both remain unsolved to this day. Interesting. So I'm wondering if it really was a mix up, like maybe the wrong woman was killed. I mean, that just seems very odd that, both women have the same name and they're both killed in the same fashion. I mean, that just seems very ironic. What do you think?
Well, it is kind of ironic, but let's look at a missing person case. It's not uncommon for siblings or family members to disappear altogether. However, it is extremely rare for two siblings to go missing at different times under completely different circumstances. Take for a case of the gentleman Michael Palmer living in Wallisa, Alaska. He was the youngest of three brothers. During the early morning hours of June 4th, Michael and his three friends left a graduation party on their bicycles. Michael had gotten so far behind they had lost sight of him. He never returned home. He was reported missing. His bike was later discovered in Little Snistra River. His wet, muddy sneakers were found 180 meters away, which is about 600 feet. A search of the river turned up no trace of Michael's body. He's never been found. Chucky, Michael's older brother, would also disappear under mysterious circumstances over a decade later. On April 13th, 2010, 30-year-old Chucky was staying with friends and relatives at a cabin in the Takahita Mountains. They decided to take a ride through the area on their snowmobiles. Like his little younger brother, Chucky became separated from his group and at some point was never seen again. The following day, his snowmobile was found. No sign of Chucky or any of his other footprints in the area. Chris Palmer, the oldest sibling in the family, had stayed behind the cabin the night Chucky disappeared. He now has to go through the ordeal of searching for his missing younger brother for the second time in 11 years and still coming up empty. Now, what does that teach us, everybody?
Don't lag behind?
No. Don't try to go riding off with your friends, whether it be a bicycle or a snowmobile. Stay up front.
Now, my wonder is though, did they fake their disappearances?
I doubt that,
I mean, it could be that the 15-year-old, maybe something was going on in the home or something, so he faked his disappearance, and then a few years later contacted his brother and said, hey, this is where I am, living the life, come join me. So he faked a disappearance too and went and joined him. Could that be possible?
It might be possible.
Now, National Geographic reports that your odds of being killed by a meteor are 1 in 1,600,000. So the odds would seem infinitesimally smaller that a meteor, which had been flying through space for more than 4.5 billion years without hitting a single target, would hit the home of a family with the last name of Comet, or spelled comet. According to Time magazine, that is exactly what happened to a family in France. Thankfully, no one was hurt, but the Comets now are the proud owners of their own extremely rare extraterrestrial rock. How about that?
Yeah, I'd like to have that.
A comet hitting a family of comets.
Yes.
Yes. Also, Stephen and Helen Lee had just gotten engaged when they made a shocking family discovery.
What, they
Looking
were the
through,
brother and sister?
hold on.
Okay.
As they were looking through family photos during their engagement party in New York, they realized that Helen's mother and Stephen's father had nearly gotten married in Korea in the 60s.
Ah,
Now, because their parents disapproved of the intended mates, they moved on to other relationships. So, Lee's father had two loves of his life, his current wife and Helen's mom. These were from two different sides of the world. And now, decades later, they actually share grandchildren together. That's kind of an interesting, sweet story, but can you imagine if they would have gotten married?
yeah, brother and sister. Ew.
Yeah. But that didn't happen.
That didn't happen.
Yes. Then we come along with Violet Jessup, who was a nurse and ocean liner stewardess who earned the nickname Miss Unsinkable. Now, how did she get this nickname, you ask?
How did she get that name?
She survived both accidents of the Titanic in 1912 and its sister ship, the HMHS Britannic. They both met the same fate. I'm sorry, the Britannic met the same fate in 1912 as the Titanic. She was also reportedly aboard a third ship known as the RMS Olympic when it was hit by a warship. However, the Olympic itself stayed afloat. So she's definitely had some good luck there.
Yeah, I'll never take her sailing.
No, let's not do that.
Yes. So let's talk about the first and last soldier of World War One. Did you know that they're buried next to each other?
Really?
Yes. By the time of World War One, which was originally supposed to be the war to end all wars or the Great War, and it claimed an estimate 1 million British lives. The first recorded English casualty of war, 17-year-old soldier John Parr, and the last recorded casualty, 30-year-old George Edwin Ellison. Isn't that interesting?
That is interesting.
Yeah, because they have their graces that face one another just 15 feet apart. And Saint Symphisium Military Symphony Military Cemetery. Why is my tongue not working today? It's usually your tongue not working properly.
My tongue's not working either.
A father and son were the first and last casualties during the construction of the Hoover Dam, 14 years apart. Now, according to the United States Bureau of Reclamation, out of the 2,100 people that worked on the building of the Hoover Dam, there are only 96 deaths on the job site and
That's
one dog.
21,000
Yes,
out of
21,000.
21,000. Yes.
Only 96 deaths and one dog.
Oh.
Among the first was J.G. Tierney, who drowned along with his colleagues on December 20th, 1922, conducting a geological survey prior to construction. 14 years later, on the exact anniversary of Tierney's death, the final death of the project was recorded. His son, J. G. Tierney's son, Patrick, who, according to the Las Vegas Review Journal, fell from an electrical tower. This kind of
Oh
seems like a
no.
father son type situation. I mean, first we got, uh, you know,
Yep.
I
That's a
mean, and
father
then we
son.
also go into Esther and Paul Gratian, who've been seeing each other for a short time when Paul decided to ask her to be his girlfriend. That day, while paying for a sandwich, he noticed the dollar bill he was about to hand the cashier had the name Esther written on it in pencil. Ooh, how strange, he thought, that he should happen to be right when he was thinking about their relationship. He had kept the bill and decided to frame it as a gift to his true love. She was speechless when she saw it, but told him to ask her about it later. Mhm. Years passed. They got engaged, then married. The framed dollar bill resurfaced in their home. Apparently, dear sweet wife Esther had written her name on the dollar and a few others after a breakup and said to herself at the time she would marry the man that brought it back to her. Thank goodness, Paul, you knew what you were doing. So she just didn't tell him why she was so speechless. She thought bringing up the marriage so soon in the relationship would scare him off. At that moment, in Esther's mind, Paul was the one.
That reminds
Woo-hoo!
me of, have you ever seen that movie, Serendipity?
Yes, I did. I love that.
Yes, that reminds me a lot of it, where she writes her name in the book and
Hmm.
his name and number on the bill, and then they find him years later.
Yep.
Love that movie.
Uh,
It's one of our favorites.
yes. I also, if you've ever noticed that, if she would have stayed on that floor for just 10 more seconds, the door would have opened.
It just wasn't the right time.
Yeah,
Everything happens in time and place.
yes, it does.
Now, in 2001, a 10-year-old girl named Laura Buxton stood in front of her in her front yard with a red balloon. On the side of the balloon, she wrote the words, "Please return to Laura Buxton," with her address. She then released it into a strong wind. The balloon traveled roughly 140 miles south, where it finally landed in the yard of another 10-year-old girl. And the second girl's name? Laura Buxton. After getting in touch and explaining the coincidence, the girls decided to meet. I hope their parents were aware of this.
Yeah, I hope so.
When they met, they discovered they had a whole range of uncanny similarities as they looked and dressed alike. They both had a 3-year-old chocolate lab, a gray rabbit, and a guinea pig. Both brought their guinea pig with them for the meeting unplanned. I don't know, the whole thing about a little girl writing her name and address on a balloon and releasing it, that just seems a little dangerous in my opinion. What do you think?
There's a that is kind of a coinky dink. Now, it would be an incredible story without the coincidence of an 80-year-old Zhu Wangfeng of the Jingzhou province of China, who had saved an 8-year-old boy from drowning despite his advanced age and recent injuries. But according to Newsweek, the events took an odd turn when Zhu discovered that 30 years prior, he'd actually had saved the boy's father from drowning. As
Wow.
well, what odds? It's clear why some people believe in guardian angels. I mean, Zhu and not only saved the boy when he was 8, but 30 years earlier, he saved the boy's father from drowning. So, right place, right time.
I would say so.
Yeah. Now, Royce Burton, did experience an incredible coincidence in front of an entire classroom of witnesses. Burton, teacher at the he was a teacher at a New Jersey university, decided to tell his story, a class that he had taken place in 1940s. He was a Texas Ranger in the Rio Grande.
Woohoo!
Yay! He had become disoriented when climbing out of a canyon, nearly losing his balance just as he reached the top. Another ranger stepped in and dragged him to safety by his rifle strap. They both connected but lost touch when they both enlisted as soldiers during World War II. As he recounted the story, who should walk in the classroom but Joe, the other ranger? Joe had tracked him down all those years later and just happened to walk into the room at the precise moment that our dear Ranger Royce Burton was telling his story.
Now that must have been a really long time because I've lived here in the Rio Grande Valley for about
20
what
years.
or more, and I don't
Yeah.
know of any canyons. So
Well, that
yeah,
was more or less on the west side of the Rio Grande.
yeah, there. I don't know of any canyons around here.
I do.
Really?
Yeah. It's over Big Bend area.
Well, yeah, but that's not really in the Rio Grande Valley.
It's
That's
by
in
the
the
Rio
hill
Grande
country.
River.
Okay. Well, 19th century French poet Émile Deschamps experienced a coincidence for the record books. As a teenager, he met an Englishman named Mr. de Fortescue. He introduced Deschamps to plum pudding for the first time. A decade later, Deschamps saw plum pudding on a restaurant menu and ordered it. The waiter had sold the last one to a man in the back of the restaurant, so he called out to Mr. de Fortescue by name. Another decade passed, and Deschamps was at a dinner party serving plum pudding. He joked that the party must be for Mr. de Fortescue because he loved plum pudding. And then who inexplicably showed up at the front door at that very moment? Mr. Fortescue. He had accidentally come to the wrong door on his way to another dinner party. And for our last one, in 1929, the novelist Anne Parrish was ambling along the Seine and stopped at a bookstall to browse titles. One of her old favorites was Jack Frost and Other Stories. It caught her attention, so she bought a copy for 1 franc. She then met her husband, who was sitting at a nearby cafe, to show him the copy. His jaw dropped when he saw what was written inside.
What was written inside? Please tell me.
Her name and address, as the copy had been hers when she was just a child.
Wow.
And that brings an end to our strange coincidences.
Well, have you ever had a strange coincidence?
Um, I'm sure I have, but I can't think of any at this very moment. How about
Ooh.
you?
Well, I've had a few, and too few to mention. Uh, I've had stories that come too close to home. Interesting to note. Well, it's not a strange coincidence. It's just a deja vu type situation. When I went to go see Return of the Jedi, which is the third movie of the original trilogy, I sat front row center. I arrived 15 minutes before the movie start with my mother. When Revenge of the Sith appeared, I arrived 15 minutes late. The only seat in the whole house was the seat front row center to watch Return of the Sith.
Sounds like you came full circle.
Yes.
Yes.
Just one of the many things of coincidences.
Yes. So we ask, what are your thoughts of these incidents? Are there any that we missed? Or have you had any coincidences you'd like to share? Let us know in the comments. And if you have any ideas for the show or would like to share your story, you can email us at info@skepticpsychic.com. And join us next week. We will
What are
be
we going to talk about
discussing
next week?
we are discussing Mandela effects.
Mandela. Is that like the president of South Africa, Nelson Mandela?
No, these are effects that we remember as our childhood that are different from what they're showing us, saying that our memories are false.
Oh, like the Sinbad movie.
Yes. We will be discussing these Sunday at 8:30 Central, 9:30 Eastern, 7:30 Mountain, and 6:30 Pacific. So make sure you join us next week for that.
And
And
one final thought. I just reached my attention that Gordon Lightfoot, uh, the Canadian singer and performer who wrote such great ones as Sundown and If You Can Read My Mind, has died today.
oh, I'm so sorry to hear that.
Yes,
We also lost Jerry Springer this week.
yes. But he also wrote an interesting song called the Edmund Fitzgerald, which is a tragic story of about a sinking of a ship in one of the Great Lakes. In fact,
Interesting.
if you ever watch the show with the two investigators and your favorite sidekick, they actually talk about the Edwin Fitzgerald.
Two investigators and my favorite psychic.
Yes,
My favorite psychic is Chris Fleming.
I thought it was Chip Coffee.
No, that's my second favorite.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
yeah, he is awesome. I love Chip Coffee and I love his attitude. He's just phenomenal. But
Yes,
with
but
that,
what is the show called?
it's Kindred Spirits.
Kindred Spirits. Yes, they actually had an episode where they were investigating the Maritime Museum where the Edmund Fitzgerald uh, on the lake where that happened.
Interesting. I will definitely check that out. And with that, we wish you all a good night and hope to see you
Unpleasant
Sunday.
nightmares.
Sweet dreams, everybody. Good night.
Goodbye.